Hello again, welcome to video 2. So we've got our fabric, tape measure, craft pins and our trusty pin cushion for this. So I'm going to be showing you how to transfer your measurements onto the fabric and how to pleat your fabric. So grab one of your trusty craft clips, grab your tape measure. If you don't have a massive banister, this can be done without. So finding the centre of your curtains. With these, all I've simply done, as you can see, with black thread, doesn't really matter, any colour, simply sewn them into one gigantic piece of fabric. So the seam is going to act as the middle of our skirt. So simply take, hello Pandora, the seam of your skirt and clip the middle to it. Try to do it without a banister, just because not everyone has one. So we know that my horse's length that he needs for the skirt is 47 inches. So might take a few attempts to measure it by yourself. I've got some pins where I did this earlier. So as we can see down, I've gone down to 48 where the pins are because I'm allowing myself an inch for seam allowance. Simply take it out and we know the front of our fabric then, we need the length for me. So right at the very edge of my fabric, what I've done to just give myself extra material is I've taken out the seam that they put in. Again, trusty craft clip on the very edge of the fabric. And so we know that what I need for me is 43, I think we established earlier. So I've just gone down a bit lower to allow myself a seam allowance. Just put a cross of pins in where I need it to be. So now we've got our measurements pinned onto our skirt. Find yourself in your house the biggest flat area you can. Whether that means, before I even moved in here, moving your sofa and having the whole living room floor. That's, c'est la vie, that's what it means. So take your fabric and get it as flat as humanly possible. Don't worry about the other half for now. We just want to focus on working with the one half. So try and fold it nicely as possible, just so it stays nice and flat for you. Roll it all up so you've got fabric as even as you can. So I want it for this just off the floor. Might take a bit of playing with to get it perfect. There we go, nice and nice. So there we go, nice and straight. This has got a lovely crease in it that I can use. Keep that down the middle of the banister. There we go. So now we need to work on getting there to there. One of the nice easy way to do that, go in the middle, grab one of your craft clips, just fold in the other underside of the fabric a little bit and clip away. Grab the other end, don't pull it too taut, otherwise you'll pull your fabric. Then roughly where you want it to be and clip away. So now we know roughly the line we need to follow. If your fabric won't stay up, I'm just twisting the tape measure around the other side of my banister, keep the fabric taut. So, trusty pin cushion. And one of the tips for this is you can never use too many pins. So first of all, I like to go a little bit straight, just so I got nice coverage by my feet. So from there, I'll work my way down. Pin in as we go. So we've got a pin there, pinning it together, gradually going down. Never needs to be perfect. Just a rough guide. So if we go, I like obviously the back bit to be a bit straight, so you have nice coverage over their bottom. So voila, we have our nice line of pins for that half. Untangle my tape measure. And now, the best way I found to do this is grab the other half of your curtain and simply copy it. Come back and find your seam. Throw your curtain about a little bit. Making sure obviously when you're down here it matches, so obviously I've got to bring a bit more curtain over this side. And then once you find the bottoms, there we go. Match them all up and clip. So you can hold that taut. And play around. So clip together and play around a little bit. So you've got roughly the other half. And now go into your skirt, find your pin, and simply pop another one in just this side of the fabric. So go up underneath and pin. I always try and use red or really brightly coloured pins on the edges. So I'll grab my last red pin. Find the edge. There we go. So go up underneath. I know there's another pin there. Found it. Even if you have to pinch a bit of the fabric. And pin. And just keep going. Up underneath your skirt, finding your pin, matching it up. Doesn't matter if this is rough, this is why you've given yourself an inch longer for seam allowances. When you sew in your seam, that's what will make this all come together with beautiful edges that are nice and neat. So there we go, and we can see that we've now nicely lined up through there all the way across. So now you've done that, it'll be time then, take out your clip. Find your pin. And create your seams. So this then, I'll find the clip, hold the fabric nice and taut, pop the clip in. It is a slightly tedious process. So you've got your hand there, pull your pin out, pop your pin in. See that your pin's there, pinch the fabric underneath it, and pop your pin in. So instead of you watching me do this whole boring process for the two sides, we'll make a little cut scene here, and then you'll see me again in 2 seconds when we start to pleat. Okay, so now that we've pinned out our entire skirt to the correct length, you can see that we're going to have an awful lot of leftover fabric. That's not a problem. So now we want to give ourselves, possibly to the edge of the machine, nice little overlap. Always keep a pin cushion handy. Taking the pins out, so you can see now, just gone to the very edge number of my machine. And then make sure the fabric's nice and taut. And then just go. Always handy if you can have a machine that has a back stitch. If not, this can all be done by hand. It just takes time. You don't need a Singer Brilliance sewing machine. You can get £35 ones Aldi online. 99% of sewing machines will go through all this fabric. A little tip that I learned, if you're sewing really through thick fabric, up the stitch length so it goes longer between pushing the needle down. Just basic stitch, hold the fabric taut at the other pin, and away you go. You'll be here a while because you've got, obviously, this skirt is 4.5 meters. For skirts, I wouldn't use anything less than 4 meters lengthwise of fabric, so you get a nice full skirt. Some people use less. A lot of people use 6-7 meters, but then pleating that to your waist is going to take you a good few years. So I recommend for your first ever skirt that you're trying to do, use 4.5 meters, just so you've got less fabric to have to pleat. Because when we get onto pleating, once we finish sewing all this together, that in itself is an art form. I'll show you how to do it, and I'll show you all the mistakes I make as well, because I'll keep filming and it'll take me a good 4 or 5 times possibly to get the pleating correct. So be back in 2 minutes when I've just sewn all of this together, because I'm super quick. That's how quick I do it. Ian's going to go grab our takeaway, and we'll be back to show you how to pleat all of this. So just keep sewing, nice seam allowance for 1 inch. Make sure, obviously, with this time, the thread matches. So obviously, nice sky blue fabric. You don't want to be doing this like we've done the middle of the skirt in black or pink, unless you really want that, just so it creates a nice edge. Then once I've done all that, I'll go underneath the skirt and I'll simply cut all the excess off. Back when I've just sewn all this. Okay, so now that we've sewn our edge onto our skirt, all we've simply done is fold up the edge from where we pinned and we've sewn all the way across. All I've done here, because I've left the inch gap, I've simply cut off the excess. I can show you what to do with the excess, little accessories you can do, hat bands, sashes, I'll show you all of that. But now we've got the mammoth task of pleating all of this to our waist size. So first things first, take your tape measure away from your cat and measure it. So I want comfortably, with a little bit of give in it, possibly 32. So then obviously put that in half, that'll be 16. So once you've got your half measurement, you put the 16 inches, thank you Mia, in the middle of your skirt. Once you've done that, use the big clip, this is just from Wilko, come in a pair, for the middle, and clip it on. So you know that this half of your skirt now unfortunately needs to be pleated all the way down to this size. And then whatever you do with one half, it's just going to be simple mirror onto the other. Come on, help her. Help over there. So using the biggest flat space you have, for this I do not recommend using a banister. Simply lay out your skirt. Grab your other craft clips if you have them, if not, your pins. And you want to get this as flat as humanly possible in the space you have. So, got that all nicely laid out. So, nice and simple. If you have another tape measure, that can come in very handy because my cat likes to steal them. I do have two. The pleat for the middle, we do a nice big pleat, so we get nice coverage over the bottom. So usually to start with, for the middle, it can go bigger, it can go smaller. I do a nice 5 inches from the middle. I fold that then in. And then because you're going to be doing this with both sides, this clip's going to be holding a lot of weight. Make sure you've got all of the material nice and in. Remove the big clip. Go exactly pinpoint to the middle. Grab your tape measure again, put your 16 inch right over the middle. Hi Mia. Don't recommend having Mia as a helper. And flip your tape measure out the way. Grab your other tape measure. This is all trial and error though. I could pleat this half and it could be completely wrong and I might not get it into the 16 inches. It might take me 3 or 4 attempts to get it right. This is just showing you basic how I pleat. So from there, I'll put another pleat over the top for the middle. So this time I went 5 inches last time, this time I'll go 3 inches. So grab the end, oh God, what's it gonna do? Go for 3 inches and go into the middle. So 3 inches, into the tape measure, pinch and into the middle. Take your tape measure off, take that big clip off again, pulling it all up lovely and beautifully in line. I'm going to take the white tape measure off for now, because that can just be used as a nice simple reference guide, but unfortunately for her, my cat, it's being used as a toy. So now I'll keep all of the pleats the same. I'll go from the edge of the inner pleat. So from the edge of the inner pleat, I'll measure out 3 inches again and just pull in. Make sure it's all nice and straight. Handy to have these closer to you than I just did. Hold them all together and clip. If you don't have clips, you can use pins. I just personally find clips a lot easier because I've bent far too many pins doing this with far too thick a fabric. So edge of your pleat again. Measure out 3 inches and bring it in to the edge. So make sure you've got the corner to corner on your fabric. Holding it all nicely together. Grab a clip, clip away. So just to make Ian's life a bit easier, bring it a bit closer. We only do this 1/2 at a time because if you do it completely pleat-tong, you're not going to replicate it. So you're not wasting your other time doing the other half. I'll pleat the other half. I'll remember here 5 inches and 3 and 3. And unfortunately, this is just a case of repetition. So measure out 3 inches from the corner of your other pleat and bring it over and in. Make sure they're nicely meeting together. Pull out the fabric, make sure it all lies lovely and flat, and clip away. So then you can start to see your pleats taking shape nicely. I'll move that one a little bit further in. So you can start to see the shape. Corner of your pleat. These pleats are called knife pleats. You can do skirts with box pleats. I don't recommend them. You can do skirt waistbands. I've seen beautiful ones done with millions and millions of tiny darts in the waist to get the fabric then to the waistband size needed. But this is just the simplest way I have found. So corner to corner, pull up the fabric nicely and clip. 3 inches from the edge of your pleat, fold it over, bring it all together and clip. So then you can keep seeing from the edge how long you've got to go. Every now and again, if you have untaped your measure like I have, you can start to see, is it going to work? Do I need to make these pleats even bigger? Do I need to maybe go 4-inch pleats? So we'll keep going with 3 inches for now and see how we're going. I may need to take it apart and do 4-inch pleats. It's not a race. So as we keep on going, seeing more and more, simply folding over, making sure our fabric all lines up beautifully, because when we put it through the machine, we don't want it to drop any of the pleats and the pleats not go through, because then that is a slight disaster. So making sure every single time you pull the fabric up so it all meets. 3 inches again, measured out, all nicely in line. Grab a clip and clip away. Edge of our pleat, 3 inches, fold it over. Meet my other cat, this is Pandora. She's a bit more helpful than Mia. If you're gonna have any cat as a helper, I do recommend Pandora instead. So as we keep going, keep roughly checking. So now we know we've got to 7 inches left to play with. Are we going to get all of that into that? Let's keep going and keep trying. 3 inches, fold it over, all nicely together, and clip. Three inches, fold it over, pull it all together. Gonna run out of clips. Gonna have to start using pins. Bloody 8 pins. Okay, because we have got the edge of our fabric where I pulled it out to get some more, what we can do is fold it over, but we'll see if we need to do that. So again, just check in. Now I've got 4.5 inches to play with to get all this. So what I'm going to do, because this part is going to be the part over my leg, I'm going to measure out 3.5 for here. And from here, just so it's clear on the other side, when I come to copy, I'm going to pin. So I know I've got that many pleats at 3 inches, and then this many pleats at 3.5 inches. This is why I hate pins. Recommend using a thimble if you've got one when you start using pins. So laying it all out nice and flat. From the edge of the inside of our pleat, we're going 3.5 now. If you do change up in the middle of pleating, like I've just done, I don't recommend going, say, if you completely copy this one from 3 inches to say 5 inches, it'll look too different on the waistband. I only recommend, if you need to, going up in a 1/2 inch increment. You can see why I've bent all my pins now. So let's check. So I've only got one more pleat I can play with, because I can see by there I am right on the edge. So let's see. Let's measure out 3.5 inches from there. And go in. Making sure all the fabric is all nicely lined up. This can be very fiddly. So I've got that much excess. You do want some excess if you want a nicely folded over waistband. For example, the one I've got here, it's just got a small little overlap. You can have bigger overlaps. I do not, depending on your size. For me, nice 5 inch overlap. So let's see. 16 leaves us exactly to the yellow pin pretty much. So from the yellow pin, I want, for me, a 5 inch overlap. So you can cheat. I'm going to just simply fold over that edge. Hi Mia. So simply nice and folded over. Now, I'm lucky. I've managed to do this first time, probably because I've done at least a dozen skirts and I've done them for my waistband. I know what works for me. Other skirts have taken me, my friend's skirt Anne, her purple one, took me 3 attempts. My first skirt I did in box pleats. That must have taken me happily 6 attempts to do. If you don't get it perfect, it's fine. So we've gone here for 20 inches overall because we want it to be 16 for me. So that's given us a nice little 4-inch overlap. Now, in a click, I'll do the other side and then I'll show you how I put this then through the machine. Because with my machine, I do different setups for the skirts. So in the waistbands and the pleats. However, you can see this, it can be done by hand. You don't need a sewing machine. It can be done by hand. Sometimes I'll put this through the machine and I'll reinforce the pleats, especially the big central pleat here in the middle. I'll reinforce that by hand because obviously you got, say, a metre of fabric then going to be underneath this pleat in some cases, especially with my panel skirts. So I'll show you when it comes to the next video and fitting. You'll see how I've had to reinforce that because you've got this big, beautiful panel in some skirts, especially my silver outfit. There's 4 layers of fabric in that for the back panel, and how I've reinforced that and made that work because that would not go through the machine. Because you've got 4 layers there, make that 8 layers when you've pleated, put another pleat on top, 16 layers of fabric to try and go through a sewing machine. Don't recommend it, don't do it. Unfortunately, just do it by hand. So I'll quickly pleat up the other half of this with the help of Mia, and then I'll come back then and I'll show you how to put it through the machine. Okay, so now we've completely pleated our skirt and we've mirrored the other side. Always, always, always triple check. So from one end to the other end, I've got it as 36 spot on. We know that my half measurement is 16, so we've got a nice little overlap each side for the skirt. Now we'll be taking this over to the machine and we'll be starting to sew. So grab your tape measure, grab your pin cushion, and when picking up your skirt, because part of it is pins, grab in the middle and let it drape. Do not pick it up from the top edge like I've done before and then have your clips and pins fall out and you need to start again. So, make sure we don't sit on the all-important piece of equipment. So, putting this in your sewing machine can be quite a tricky task. So we want to make sure we've got this edge going through the machine, as we don't want the bulk of fabric all up under here. So I just got it on normal stitch, grabbing gently the one edge. You can see from the inside all the pleats marry up beautifully. So going with the sky blue again, make sure I pull out a lot of excess when I'm doing my skirts. So making sure everything all marries up, because you want to sew as close to this edge as you can, so then you're keeping the length of your skirt. Because for my skirts, I don't add waistbands. I've got one there that I can show you later that I have added a waistband to. And if you want to add waistbands, I can show you how. So making sure it is all nice and neatly underneath. And once it's locked in place, taking out pin. So holding on nicely to the edge, holding on to the excess thread we've got. I'm going to try and keep it all nice and neatly to that edge. So go forward a few. I always try not to sew off the edge of the fabric. If you do and you're learning, it's not a disaster sewing off the edge of the fabric. making sure we keep everything nice and taut here, obviously being careful because I've got the pins facing down that way. So just making sure everything underneath, excuse the cat, it's the helpful one again, making sure everything stays up and together as we sew. And now that we're practically on top of the pin, I'll take it out. I do not take it out any sooner because you want all that fabric to be in the feet, so it's staying all nice and together. So we can see here, this one is slipped down. Just pulling it up, making sure it all meets. And keeping the pressure on that part. Again, we're practically on top of the pin, so only then will I remove the pin. Now I've removed the pin, making sure everything all marries up. It's all lying nice and flat underneath, so we're not sewing kinks into the outfit. So that bit wants to fold up a little bit, so I'll pull the pin out slightly just so I can move that fabric down. Now I'm practically on top of the pin. I'll remove the pin. Again, every pin you remove, just making sure everything stays lovely. You can see here I'm bunching up. So I'm going to gently pull the skirt to the side so I can have everything laying now nice and flat. Sometimes I even actually find waistbands easier to do by hand, just because you can pull and adjust as you're going a lot easier. But obviously just for the look and the finish, a sewing machine, I can't sew as neat as this thing. That's why they're built. Again, now I'm practically on top of the pin, I'll remove the pin. Before I got super excited and removed pins a little bit too early, and then pleats have fallen. So you've got the fabric just lying nice and flat underneath. With clips, unfortunately you do need to remove them a little bit sooner than pins. You can't quite sew on top of them. So just make sure then you're pressing down where your clip was. Again, always, you can never check underneath enough to make sure everything's going to plan underneath. The back side, the bit that's going to go onto you, should be as neat as the front. It should be an exact mirror image on the other side and be just as neat. So remove the clip, press down where the clip was, making sure all the fabric stays beautifully in line. Every now and again, check in the other side. The last thing you want to do is sew to the halfway point. That's also why we use the big clip. It lets me know I'm halfway there. Keep sewing and sewing and sewing and realise your bobbin's run out of thread. Done it one too many times where I've been sewing lovely and merrily all the way halfway through my outfit, and I realise after the third pleat my bobbin had run out of thread. And then I've got to repleat and then re-sew the whole thing. So keeping the pressure on this part of your machine and keeping on gently going through. Making sure all your fabric is nicely in line. So you can see there, it pops slightly out of line, just fiddling around, making sure it all lines up beautifully. So you can see here I've got a little fold going on. Just pushing that down back underneath so the fold isn't showing in the outfit. And pressing down as hard as I can then to keep that all beautiful. Going underneath the outfit, pressing it all down. You can gradually then start seeing your creation come into life. As I don't want it to be dragging down on the machine, then just throwing the skirt up the other side. As this is important part of the outfit, we'll keep the video going and you can watch me do the entire skirt. So I'll show you the settings I'll change on my sewing machine when I come to this big bad boy here. So always just making sure it all marries up beautifully. It is a fiddly process. You can see why I prefer craft clips to pins. So we're getting close to halfway now. So always just making sure it all lines up. So you can start hearing the thud now of the sewing machine. Lets you know it's sewing through thick lots of material. So simply, I'm coming to halfway. I know under here this skirt is obviously 2 layers. Pleated once, 4, pleated twice, 8, pleated twice, 16. So going through 16 layers of fabric, I up the stitch width then to make it easier on the machine. Keeping on pulling my skirt round to make sure it all lies beautifully flat on the other side. So just going through now, making sure all of this, because this is going to be obviously be the very centre of the back, the bit that's most on show. You want obviously this bit to be as perfect as possible. Ian comes around this side. You can show you then from this side exactly what the machine's doing without the clip being in the way. So we're making sure everything lies nice and flat. We know that our big pleat is 5 inches in, so we know then that it will start here. So making sure everything lies as beautifully flat as humanly possible. Checking all underneath. Removing the clip at the last point possible. So we've got to the point I need to remove the big clip. Keeping all the pressure you can here. So the last thing you want is these pleats to fall out. So making sure everything lines up beautifully. Sometimes you might need an extra pair of hands. A lot of the time I do shout at Ian quite loudly to come here. I've got a disaster going on. Pleats are going where I don't want them to. So keep in all the pressure. Okay, so now we know we've gone through the middle. Obviously we know there's a lot of weight under there. I'll back stitch now to make sure that bit is reinforced as possible. There we go, so we've reached halfway. You can see how it's turning out all beautifully across the skirt. So we'll keep going, keeping as much weight on as possible. Again, removing the clips at the last possible point, making sure everything lies nice and flat. So you can just see there the material starting to poke out the end, which we don't want. It's just going to pull it across. And there I know then that I've gone across, because I can see it underneath, I've gone across the thickest part. So I'll reduce the stitch width back to 2.5 on the machine, because I know it's not going to now be struggling going through that much material. On as close as we can. Just keeping everything nice and flat, going under the skirt every now and again with your spare hand, making sure it all lies beautifully. The key to doing this is just taking as much time as you need. So now we can see, haven't got that much left. You might find that you prefer pins because you can remove them practically when you're on top of them. Unlike the clips, you do have to remove them a little bit sooner. All the time, constantly checking underneath to make sure everything is nice and flat. And always constantly checking the other side, making sure your bobbin hasn't run out and you've got disaster on your hands. Always before pleating the skirts and putting this part through the machine, I do recommend checking your bobbin, seeing how much thread you've got on there, because that's the last thing you want. If I was doing this by hand, I wouldn't just use one single piece of thread, I would double it through my needle. So I'd make sure I've got a nice thickness of thread going through. Not quite in line, so just going to pull that back through. Making sure it all lies lovely and flat. there we go. And do just check, because I personally know I've got a little pin in here where I just folded the edge over ever so slightly so I don't have a raw edge. So now and what I do tend to do with my skirts, I'll then angle, so I'm sewing right to that corner. So just nice and simple, twist your hand at an angle. So you're then lining that up with the needle. And then I'll go back just until I meet my original thread line, go back round, and just do 1 or 2 stitches back, going back forward. So you've got a nice taut edge there. That'll come in handy then when we start sewing in our fixtures. So I'm just going to neaten this up, cut all the ends off, and I'll see you in 2 minutes when you come to sew on the fixtures, and I'll show you what fixtures and fittings I personally use for my skirts. Okay guys, so we've done our skirt, we've pleated it all, we're really proud of our creation now, but now we need to get this to fit us. So I'll show you now what I've done. Just coming down here, I've simply put pins in the skirt where it's going to meet. I've done this on either side, so you can see I've got a nice overlap in the skirt, and I've just put pins in where I need to put my fittings. The fittings I use for skirts are nice and simple, just hooks and eyes, like bras. I got the bigger ones because before I got small ones and found them ever so fiddly. So I'm now just going to sew these onto the skirt, and I'll be right back with you, and we'll put it on Miss Mannequin and we'll admire our work.